Cool. Yep, the red light is blinking. All right. Cool. And maybe to add on what Nelson just said, that's something we struggled with as well. And we've introduced Shaping Fridays, which is engineers will prioritize collaborating on pitches on Fridays. So if there's work coming in where like us product managers are asking them to collaborate on pitches, they will kind of have to prioritize this over cycle work. And we acknowledge that we are not to take too many resources from the actual cycle work. So it's kind of a handshake deal we have between product and engineering. And maybe dedicating time, as Nelson said, sounds good.
Hey, David. So I have a quick follow-up question for that. So the idea is you can tap a engineer to help with shaping at any point within the either active 6 weeks of work or cool down. Is that correct?
Yes, on any Friday.
On any Friday. Sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
And we swiped that idea off of Mike Bartlett from the first Meetup. I think they're doing the same.
Okay.
Because we struggled a lot with the technical viability of the pitches. So our first 2-3 ones, they ran over, and we just let them run over. And then we had 9-week cycles and never stopped. And yes, one of the issues was technical viability. So now we've kind of baked it in that the time has to be allocated by engineering, and we are more prompted, I guess, to also take him up on that offer.
On that similar topic, like not a similar topic, the same question, just our approach, having already like a technical tech lead in a team, having product manager, having a product designer in there, tech lead would be the one who's helping during the shaping on the technical side, and we would try to keep the tech lead away from actually being in the cycle and doing the coding. So he is more helping out the team if there are any technical challenges or unknowns that are difficult to handle during the cycle, and at the same time working with a product manager, product designer for the upcoming shaping things. So this is just going from our agile background, maybe.
Yeah, we had a similar, we kind of invented a role of what we called the engineering advisor. And so like it started to be like our engineering managers, because essentially like we had an aspiration to have our engineering managers be 50% coding and 50% kind of people management. But at the scale we had in terms of engineers to manager ratio is mostly you're just doing people management and then also like planning around the shape up process. And I think what we've realized is that because they're not hands-on keyboard, their ability to be like an effective shaping partner is really hampered. They're not quite sure exactly how something's implemented, or what are the rabbit holes that you might get into. And I think there was also just organizational issues of trying to like coordinate these two different teams of product and engineering and design to kind of actually like figure out like what the shaping was. So yeah, I think we invented the role. It didn't quite pay off. And what David and I and the rest of the team are trying to figure out is how can we bring like the actual engineers in to vet, to help with shaping and solutioning the stuff. And I'm trying to also think we also got in a habit where like the pitch was the thing, like it's all about pitch writing. And I think anyone who's done this enough realizes that the bulk of the work is shaping, and the pitch just writes itself if you nail it. And so kind of trying to tease out those two details, like let's have an engineer help you during the solutioning shaping portion, and then maybe we can use that cool down period to actually like write the artifact. And then if we can identify who the team's going to be, who's going to take on that work, have them review it and ask questions of it and say, like that's where you're starting to kind of unpoke the rabbit holes. So that's where we're thinking. Obviously we haven't tried it. So I'll report back on how that works out. But I'm just curious if anyone else has had that sort of challenge.
It sounds good what you are planning. I'm just curious, how many people do your engineer managers manage?
We're about 5 or 6 engineers to a manager at this point.
Yeah.
So at that time we were about 7. And so between you get through the one-on-ones and all that stuff, the weeks, you don't have a lot of time left over to actually do some coding. So.
Yeah, part of this might be, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Oh, wait.
I was going to say that part of this is, it might just be a culture shift thing and less of like a process change, but just more of a culture. Because like, if I talk to engineers now and hey, can you help me with a pitch? They'll just look at me blankly like, huh? What's that? But if I just say, hey, I'm having a problem designing this thing, or can I get your technical advice on this? And I never say anything about the pitch or anything like that. And if they have time, they'll just jump in. Yeah, let me check it out. Like, what's your question? And then, so I sort of leverage it that way. But you're right, that works for me, but it doesn't scale. So I could see where you're running into that challenge. But I've noticed that there's some tech leads that have a better personality that's more suited for shaping. Like if they have an entrepreneurial background, is the common thread that I've seen. So, whatever that's worth.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting insight. And I was going to add, for us, it's also been a struggle. Like literally this morning, we talked about how we, by oversight, left one of our engineers out of the workspace in Basecamp where the pitches were created. And we put him back, or we actually added him last night. And all of a sudden he had so much to say about so many pitches. And he's, he's our tech lead, and he does have, that capability of adding input, during the cycle, right? Whereas some other, where there's the rest of the developers for more have been completely silent during the build, right? But maybe we're not empowering them enough, because to me, as a PM, I've always seen the engineers, even when I worked in growth and other teams, like the engineers have always a really good input to solving problems, and I want them early in the shaping. And so maybe it's an issue of like, in our case, maybe not empowering them enough and asking them to do it. So I appreciate some of the suggestions on how to fix that.
Yeah, that definitely resonates a lot with me because we were pushing that problem solving that we were just talking about into the cycles, and then it felt like kind of impossible or overwhelming under a deadline because we weren't shaping to a high enough fidelity, I think. And we're seeing improvements now. For the first time, we are now on track to finish calmly within the 6 weeks and actually kind of release to production. And we're on cycle 7 or 8 now. So it's been a while.
How many cycles did it take you to get to that sort of calm place?
Yeah,
7. That sounds really good. Okay.
So when I'm hearing, like, who said that they are in the first cycle closing to end? I think it was you, Domas, in the beginning, and also Frank, you. And first cycle, calm, like smooth sailing. That was definitely not the thing for us.
In our case, we are very early. So to respond to Pablo, we couldn't write pitches without the engineers. So it's more like the first pitches were very technical, if you want, because we have to lay down an architecture and things like that. And also, since we are dogfooting really early our product, like everybody's using it, and we know it's like Basecamp, when you use your product on a daily basis, you kind of know what you want. You don't need that many input from outside. And since we are the people building it, and we are really early, we are not like selling it because okay, I didn't say that, but we are doing a shape up on an open source project. So for us, the challenge is to manage the community, which is small at the moment, so it's okay, and keeping following our the internal vision, because we have a vision and we know we will need many cycles, but we just want to do one thing at a time and talk about the trade-off and stuff. And so when I say it's calm during the like while we're in the cycle, it's calm because like it's not like, oh, I have something like this and stuff. I've been the one being stressed because I'm working on the older product and I have to manage the expectation of the customers and stuff like that. But that's okay. We try to do that with the sales and stuff, but we really like protect the team because we know it's very important to bet on this new stuff because it could change like the sales for us and have a more like a big size in the market. So yeah, so it's funny because everyone here like is kind of working in the product, I think, for the major part, and I've been pushing Shape Up, and like this is not the CEO who decided that. Well, like this is not like at Basecamp, like Jason Fried, like he can bet on what he wants, and he has the last word. In our case, like the team is like we are more bottom up, and so this is not a struggle for us because we kind of trust the team to know what we have to do. They know the vision, so we trust them to also like know what we should do and things like that. I don't know if it's helpful, but that's how we.
Do you have a formal betting table, or is it fully kind of informal?
No. The CEO, the CTO. So at Basecamp, this is like the product manager, the CEO, the CTO, and I think there are four, and the lead engineer. And us, he was kind of more people, but with the CEO also having the last word. But yeah, so like some part of the people that will work on the cycle can write the pitches and also have a vote at the betting table, but it's not the same vote as the CTO or the CEO.
How do you guys balance implementation work and shaping work in the team?
So for now, we didn't take 6 weeks to write the pitches. Like they were, we wrote the pitches during the cooldown. So we only spent 2 weeks on the first one. And right now, like that's kind of the problem for me because like, I think it was Brian that mentioned that, like it was really important to have more time to think through things before like you write the pitch, because I agree with what, I don't know who said that, but like the point is not to write a pitch. The point is to shape up the feature and take some time to do so. So right now, this part we have to improve because we don't have a Jason Fried or a Ryan Singer internally. So we have nobody committed to that full time. That's one area we have to improve to make sure like we can like dig into. But we are very early, so for us it's not has been a problem. We could shape up in 2 weeks because we are very early.
David, you said something that caught my attention. You talked, I think I heard you refer to betting on what to shape. Is that something you do or anyone else? Do you guys actually bet on what to shape in addition to what to build? Because it seemed like that was kind of a gray area in the book. Ryan, for me, it was ambiguous, and maybe I skipped a section or something, but it seemed very ad hoc, and it seemed sort of like, I shape, or I spend time shaping whatever I think is important. Or people, might have their own ideas and like reach out to him, and that might be the impetus for shaping work. But that's one thing I've been unclear in is, shaping takes time, right, to do well, like we said. So how do you make that? What's the decision process, I guess, and even knowing what to shape? And like going beyond that, I don't know if we have time to get into it more, but I'm also curious, how much work do you guys shape that doesn't get pitched, or how many pitches do you develop that don't get bet on? Like where are things falling out for you guys?
Were you referring to me or David Krell?
I thought you, David Aaron, said that you bet on what to shape in addition to what pitches to build. Is that true, or did I misunderstand?
No, unfortunately, you misunderstood in that case.
Okay.
No, we don't do this formally. No.
Okay.
Do you guys, Mackie, you raised your hand. Do you guys do this?
Yeah, so I think it's part of the nature of having to re-platform and launch a site that's very much similar to, at least on the outer aspects, to what our consumers currently experience. And the various contracts and stuff that we have to honor.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of have like I'm going to be really embarrassed to say this. It's almost kind of like a waterfall roadmap of like, here's what we need to do. Like this is what done looks like at the macro level. And the problems that I've seen with that are a couple. One, if you miss on a cycle, there's leftovers that you don't have in your plan, which is typical waterfall. Two, by saying this is the feature that we're going to build, we end up in the kind of what Ryan Singer's talked about with the hard center and soft walls, where scope can kind of grow out, as opposed to defining this is the box that we're going to try and do something. So I'm trying to carve that out as well and say, like, when we say we're going to do this, it's going to be 1, 2, and 3. It's not going to be like to help define that boundary and the no-goes as part of putting the work out front. I think the other thing that we have to contend with is, like, we have to get a budget approved by our board and our executive team. And that comes with, all right, we're going to give you this money and we're going to get the thing done by that date. So we're marching up against the date. So we do kind of have to do a little bit of planning around what we're betting and shaping on. And then we pray that the pitch has the right amount of detail in it and that it is a right amount of work. And then we haven't reviewed it as like a formal betting table, but I kind of want to bring that back into it. And I think, like, at a macro level, I think we need to flip the process on its head and say, all right, like what exists right now? What's the next most important thing to do? And like, took a look at that plan that's sort of the guidepost. So as we're going to shape this thing, it should account for these other auxiliary things.
Yeah.
But not treat it as the
I've been trying to pair shape up with a strategic roadmap, which I think is more, kind of what you were getting at, which is, it's not feature oriented. It's what, Marty Kagan talks about, the difference between a feature roadmap and a strategic roadmap. And I think it makes a nice complement at the quarterly, annual, like whatever your board wants to see at that level. And then somebody also mentioned OKRs and things. I do think there's a place for those in pitches and in cycles. If it starts with your strategic roadmap and those have objectives and key results, and you can tie your cycle work, individual pitches back to those. I don't think it has to fit necessarily within the 6-week time frame, as long as it's working towards that strategic goal and trying to meet up with those. So that's where I'd like to get. I make no mistake, I'm nowhere near being that organized or together,
But actually, I do have something to say on that, as you just mentioned OKRs, because that kind of, the way we do it is we look a bit upstream and we have kind of a research objective on there that looks at the strategic theme of the next quarter. So we do kind of set a goal for some, like, figure out what the problem with this is, and then we can shape it.
Right, because by the time you've gotten to the betting table, you already limited your choices to just the things you've shaped and pitched. And so, I think figuring out that early stage selection criteria is important too, and still kind of ambiguous for me.
It reminds me of the Q&A portion of the first Shape Up meet, where Ryan was talking about how OKRs can almost help you delegate strategy down. Like, we're saying, hey, this is the strategic focus of the company. We're going to do to-do lists, and then the teams working in that application can figure out, all right, if that's the charge and where we're focusing for these 3 months, what kind of work can we do to improve it? So using strategy is more of a framework as opposed to like an implementation.
Similar story maybe here again. Our company was working in an OKRs framework. So our team had like an OKR for a quarter, and we just applied Shape Up in our small team. That was in the last quarter of 2019. And so we kind of had ideas what to shape, what to build for the quarter, and it worked out quite well. So for the first quarter of 2020, we did a similar thing again, like tying the what things we want to shape with what are the OKRs. But the company shifted its like the OKRs were not working for other teams and for our team as well, not really working that great. So for the first time in many years, we ditched OKRs in the second quarter, in the third quarter again, I believe, for 2020, and we just have like a low fidelity roadmap of what are the areas we want to dig deeper into, instead of having like a hard measured OKRs.
I'm just reminded, I don't know if any of you follow like the related jobs to be done crowd, or Intercom specifically addresses some of this in there. I think it's called Lessons Learned from Scaling a Product Team. They talk about how their pitches tie up to higher level objectives and strategies. So if you want, I'll just post a link in the chat. I don't know what I'm talking.
Yeah. David,
the concept of like betting on the things that you're kind of shaping is actually one of the things that came up this week for me in terms of the team kind of challenging, kind of like, if we're going to have a betting session every 6 weeks and you're just coming to me with some pitches, how do we decide what the pitches are going to be, kind of thing? So that's definitely a challenge that's kind of come up from the teams that I've been working with.
You know, another really good thing about being able to basically turn away a pitch is that it levels up the quality of the actual document. And I know that sounds silly, but at scale, right, everything can get horrible. Doesn't matter how brilliant a concept is, at scale, it just like ruins it. And one thing, because we have such a tight deadline and we have some pretty intense mechanics in terms of all this synchronizing and timeline stuff. Right now, we haven't really turned away pitches that are poorly written. And that's a big deal because it sends a terrible message to, from a product point of view, it sends a terrible message to our engineering partners. It's like, hey, you're just gonna have to deal with this and it's not good and you're gonna be stressed out. And yeah, you're gonna code all the way through cooldown because it's not scoped properly. So another real benefit to figuring out sort of the research and development phase before you start actually shaping is you'll end up with more pitches than you can actually do. And that's like for me, that's the ultimate goal.
But one thought I had when you guys said that you were kind of working on the rebuilding of the platform at Cast.com was if this isn't more like the R&D phase that kind of Ryan describes, also around hey.com, where they had, I don't know, a year of R&D where kind of they had air cover in a sense. They could just go around and poke at stuff before they adopted this cadence. How do you guys think about that?
Wish we had known about it before we started.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a lot of, I think in that talk he was talking about sort of the cement not being firm and having to throw away some stuff. So we've had some cycle projects that are like, we need to refactor this whole thing because now there's some new inputs into the equation that we need to account for, and we're going to just kind of blow it up. And I think the thing that, like, the beauty of Shape Up is, and the reason we kind of really leaned on this before it was even had a name around it, is that it really brings to the fore accountability of how you're using engineering at your company, right? You are saying, I have this number of engineers for this amount of time, and this is what I'm going to have them work on, versus, you know, these pods are there and they're kind of just working on agile, like, you know, backlogs, working on who knows what. Like, there's no sort of tying it back to a higher strategy. So yeah, I think all those extra inputs has made us go back to it. There is an internal project that we've uncovered that is going to allow our company to work better with some of our sister companies within the organization, is to tie their products into ours a little bit more efficiently than we have in the past. And so we're definitely leaning into the R&D aspect of Shape, of saying, like, we need to figure out this area. And so, like, the 6 weeks is better. It's just like, let's define the data model. And like, there's no real hard pitch up front that says what the answer is going to be, but we're going to focus on solidifying this. And we're kind of using that also as a more of an incubator for, can we do shape up right at a smaller scale, and kind of apply these new theories to that, and then hopefully bring that out to the larger team to say we can point to this example worked and this is how it didn't work, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, one thing I'd add to that, David, is just that it's like you can either learn to walk on like a level, ground, or on a 20% decline. One's a little bit more painful than the other, and we definitely have learned a lot. And it was funny. I think that I put together like a deck of tweets from Ryan Singer to share with like Mackie and some other folks around this concept of research and development before shaping, because it was just like it had just clicked. Like that's kind of what we were doing, but within this construct of shaping work and then pitching, right? And then the teams having a sense of, to be honest, like having a bit of sense of failure, right? Because they could never finish something. And it was across the board. It wasn't just engineering, it was product as well. So it's critical to get as many unknowns kind of out of there before you even start shaping. But yeah, we know that now.
All right, because we had a similar revelation. In March 2019, we started rebuilding one of our core products from scratch. And I was so keen on pushing Shaper that I was kind of leading this and given a team of 3 engineers to kind of test a new way of working and build the new product at the same time. And I wish we had just kind of declared the first 6 months at least R&D. Would have saved us a lot of pain. Yeah.
And to add on what David said, like I think I'm more of a fan of Ryan Singer share on how he works on this research phase, because he's sharing a lot of techniques. For instance, I've been embracing like taking notes on the iPad and the sketches and stuff. And before when we were working on a feature, we had the designers come up and we were spending a lot of time talking about the design, or maybe the button should be here. We stopped doing that completely. That work now is doing during the cycle, and we I don't know who say that, but we focus on higher level objective. We want, for instance, we need that to, for instance, sell that to, maybe it's for a customer, but maybe it's because if we do that, we'll have an unfair advantage on the market, something like that. So we spend less time outside of the cycle during the shaping period talking about small details. It's more high level. And I was amazed, honestly, that we are a small team, and every team member wrote some pitch, and there was 6 pitch, but we could only pick one, I think the first time, or 2, I don't remember, but and from the start, we learned to let it go. You want that, you want that, you want that. And now we all agree that we are working on that. And there is no going back, but maybe we can do that. No. It's you have 6 weeks. So for me, it's not the cycle are not the problem. Where we had to improve, and I think that's why I said before, we have no Ryan Singer. I can compare to Ryan Singer because he's reading a lot of stuff. He's very smart, but I think we really have to improve how we shape the work. This phase of even the techniques with the flow and the breadth is so productive. It's such a productive way of talking with engineers, when everybody can draw a flow and maybe about the payment and stuff and discuss that, but not without going we are not talking about the same level of details now. We are not talking about the UI and stuff. We're really talking about with an engineer. Okay, if we do that, and maybe the callback from the API in the payment, should we have it? Some stuff like that. And so that kind of stuff for us, that's for me, that's the game changer. The conversation shifted. They're not the same anymore.
Sounds really, really good. What you're talking about is having the proper level of fidelity in the shape shaping during the shaping. So Brian calls these like breadboarding, fat marker sketch techniques, but like these concepts are not like familiar. They don't click to people, at least in our case. Like, what do you mean breadboarding? What do you like? We are using now this word called like solution mechanics. Like mechanics, what are the pieces and how do they fit together, without actually looking how polished would they look, what copies would be there. So it's exactly what you're talking about, exactly what Ryan is writing about with his breadboards and fat marker sketches. What I wanted to ask you, if I heard you correctly, you had 6 pitches proposed, like 6 breadboards or fat marker sketches proposed by different members of the team. So engineers, designers, everyone is giving a solution to the same problem or to different problems that matter to them.
No, everybody was having different ideas, and the pitch start. So we were just starting. We just had 2 weeks, and we know we had to write some pitches. So not everybody was into the. Not everybody. Everybody was free to write the pitches. At some there are only maybe text, and very few. We don't need many sketches. And other made by designers. Of course, there were more graphical and stuff, but it doesn't matter, because in the end, we were just talking about the problem you want to solve with this pitch, not how the pitch is written.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
But they were addressing different problems, right? That was your question, Thomas. It was all different problems.
Two questions. Yes, who were writing the pitches, and to what problems? To the same problem or to different problems?
No, very different problem. Some to give an example, some pitches were about the authentication stack. Other pitches were about adding a feature because we are developing a front-end toolkit library. And so some stuff were about the API on the front-end library. Some other stuff were about different area of the product. And so everybody everybody tend to look problems because when you're working on the back end, you tend to write a pitch about the back end, But this was interesting. This was interesting because we could see we have to do a lot, and the question was, oh, but where should we start? What do we need first, So that was kind of cool. And some pitches, I think, we will not take them for the next round, but I think maybe 1 or 2. Maybe they will come back.
And how were any of the shapers, like the people that proposed those pitches, involved in the betting, or was it completely disconnected?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, we are not doing that by the book at the moment because we had to improvise for the first cycle. We are just only beginning, so yeah, it was not okay, everybody's having a cool down period. We were working on the product since 8 months maybe. So everybody had some kind of frustration, oh, I want to add that, I want to add that. So everybody was kind of free to write a pitch or what they really want what they want to add to improve the product. And of course, we have the executive that have another vision. Sometimes, we have that big customer that needs that, so maybe that pitch will fit better for this cycle. I don't know if anybody...
Yeah, I think my question was, or maybe somebody else in the group has had this experience, because we had the aspiration to have everybody write pitches. We wanted to invite, I don't know, designers, engineers, people from the customer success teams to be able to kind of give input into the betting process. And then the betting table is only kind of CEO, COO, and then tech lead and PMs. It's kind of a biggish round, but that for us kind of naturally those and the PMs would lean kind of towards their pitches in the betting table sessions as well. And plus, I think we're in a much better position to kind of also argue their cases. It's just kind of, it comes with the role, I think. So I don't know, anybody have experience with inviting more people into the betting process? I don't know, widening kind of the funnel of projects? No?
So there's been a couple times. So we have like directors of product, directors of engineers, and directors of design, all kind of doing that pre-betting we talked about earlier, around like what sequence of work makes sense to do, and like kind of doing some like napkin math of like, we think that these three things could be fit together into a cycle. And we kind of realized like we've unempowered our teams to actually have a say into what the things were. And so we brought all the product managers in, some more key engineers, into kind of that planning process. And that seemed to work really well. And it seemed like it increased the level of understanding of why we were doing things in a certain order, as opposed to this is the roster of stuff we need to go start shaping. That's been our only experience. But the more people you kind of get involved, I think the better output you get, or just perspectives. And like we've had engineers and engineering focused pitches. But I think part of it is we haven't hit the mark on like actually nailing what the pitch artifact is for that. Primarily because it's like, oh, it's an engineering project, it's by engineers, we kind of know what we need to do and we can kind of wing it, and then like they'll figure it out. Which I think is the opposite of the purpose of a pitch, is to have something that's written that everyone can kind of look to and say, that's why we're doing it. And also maybe go back in history and say, why is this the way it is? Well, here's the pitch and here's what we're trying to solve. So that's been our experience.
What tooling are you using to write pitches, just out of interest?
Google Docs has been where we've landed. We tried doing it within Basecamp. The collaborative nature of trying to get all the people from the different disciplines into the same document was hard. And there was a private resistance of the company to move to G Suite, and then we actually did. So what we do is there's the Google Doc that will kind of iterate over the shaping process and be delivered to the team as a Google Doc. Which actually, I'll bring up a question here. How do people feel about changing the pitch in cycle? Like if there was something that was a miss or some foundational thing that was not there, or with that we need to hammer some scope out. How are you kind of keeping track of those changes that happen in cycle? Or maybe everyone's just nailing the pitch and getting it right up front?
I would just second that question, because I don't have a good answer. I think I share a lot of the same pain, in the sense that we've put it in and we've gone over time, and I don't know, that was never good.
Yeah, I wish I had an answer, but I have at least run into the same issue. And also, in some way the pitches serve as an artifact after the fact for like what we did. And so I've had, it's not just the difficulty of clarifying like what you're doing right now, but for better or worse, they're serving as documentation kind of. And so I've had like reservations, or like I feel compelled to update them mid-cycle if we do, whatever, learn something new or change, what we're going to do, or cut scope or whatever. I feel like they almost need to be updated so that, this is how you introduce the work to the rest of the company. And it's not deceptive, but it's not accurate anymore if you don't deliver on what you do, or you change tack a little bit or something. So I feel compelled to update them.
I think that's kind of where we've landed too. I think what I've tried to do up front is like capture what it was at the beginning, because I think there's some insight you can get from this is what we thought it was and this is what we ended up doing, and comparing that delta to be like, how can we get better at not overestimating stuff? Yeah,
that's a good tip. I'm going to write that. I'm going to steal that kind of recording, because we always had just the feeling like, oh, this wasn't shaped well, but I don't know, we never went in deep enough to really point the finger at, we missed the mark on this.
Yeah, we actually have a specific post during cool down, really, on what shipped. So that it's a different structure. Usually it can be a little bit more like engineering focused, but when you compare the pitch and then what was delivered, it's pretty illuminating. It'll point out a lot of problems, a lot of areas of opportunity.
Awesome. I'm just like looking at the list of questions from the beginning, and Matthias, you had kind of the question around designers being a scarce resource. How do you get them? You can't get them as full-time members into the cycles. How do others deal with this? Does anybody have experience, including designers, or do you want to kind of go a bit deeper on that topic?
Yeah, it's basically how do you sort of manage the puzzle or the Tetris of utilizing all team members in different projects that sort of are prioritized based on the pitches that you bet on. So if you have a team, let's say larger than 10 people, how do you make the Tetris to utilize them all in a cadence with cycles? If you have any good learnings from that. And
but help me understand, why can't you put them into the cycles? Like why is it impossible to just say you're a team member of this cycle team?
I don't think that's my sort of my point to ponder. It's more how to make the puzzle go up and ensure that potentially everyone is in a project based on the pitches that you bet on. Like, do you have people just working on a non-pitched or non-betted project during your cycles? Or do you always fit everyone from the team, from the product team or engineering team, into projects based on the pitches?
Got it. So for us, yes, we do that. So but I don't know. Frank, you had something to add, I think.
No, I was going to ask because like designers, when you say designer, you don't know really what kind of profile. So I know at Basecamp, their designers can already they can do like front-end stuff, and that's also our case. So our designers, they're already busy, and we kind of also have that problem, Matthias, because we don't have that many designers, like we have more engineers. And so at the moment, our designers, they are working on one project, and if we need another designer, but we don't have one at the moment. So we have to wait they finish the work.
Yeah, I'll speak to what we have at Cars. So when we were at scale of 20 plus cycle teams, and we had 7 product managers and 5-ish designers, maybe 6, that meant that some people were pulling double duty, and that wasn't always fun. We tried with projects and aligning it, saying like let's keep a handful of projects that are just kind of more engineering based that don't need a designer, so you can kind of limit the spread of how far they need to go. I did a little bit of design in the background in my past, so I can relate to designers wanting to like have things polished before the team starts working on it, and they feel a little uncomfortable of designing on the fly, especially when you're in 3 projects. You're like, I can't do all of it at the same time, so I want to get ahead of it. So there was always a struggle of them wanting to do design in the shaping portion, but then you essentially kind of remove the latitude that your team has to make changes as needed to fit the bug. So that's a struggle that we're always wrestling with.
Yeah, imagine also as a designer being spread too thin across multiple projects, and then avoiding not becoming too much of a bottleneck. Because I really think ShapeUp's advice around finishing one slice or one scope at a time makes really good sense, and that's also sort of the approach or the concept that I think our teams will try to apply. We're still really early in the implementation of ShapeUp, but that is sort of the vocabulary that we are currently working with and experimenting with, and then yeah, I'm partly excited and partly worried how we will go about the scarce resource of designers. But no matter what, it's worth an experiment.
One thing that, just to add to what Mackie was saying, it's funny, I'm always like, I'm like your puppet, just following you. But one thing I want to add about working with design is that I found that in some cycles, when I worked, as the product person, when I worked really closely in shaping with the designer, and they conceptually wrapped their head around what we were doing, and they felt comfortable about it, that actually made them feel a lot more comfortable about designing within that like first week of the cycle, essentially. Or not, I think what happens a lot of times in design, and I used to be a designer too, about actually the majority of my career was in design. So like you worry about, it's not really the front end or actually designing this thing to work. It's that you're worried about creating some kind of train accident in the middle of your design that you just didn't think about, right? It's like the unknowns. So if you can involve the designer in the shaping process, and stick to breadboarding, stick to fat markering, right? Have hard rules around that. I think it actually buys them a level of confidence when they walk into the actual team. That if you didn't do that, it's a lot more unnerving.
Yeah, I believe that's actually pretty meaningful rationale. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, that's just from thinking about two specific cycles where I had a particular designer that liked to work that way. It was very organic. It wasn't something that we really came up with, but in retrospect, those cycles went better than the others.
But Matthias, to like your question, like also like you're asking the question, how do you shape up the teams? And I think like we really have to remember like shape up is born from Basecamp experience. It's how they work and how they are organized. And maybe you will need some times for you to get reorganized, because if you need one designer for each cycle, maybe you have to do some hiring or some I don't know, like hire freelancer for a cycle. I don't know. Maybe we will solve that problem. But like, there is a problem, at least, because like the team have to then for me, like the main point is really being focused and betting also your time, the time of a designer, for 6 weeks on a problem to solve, because it's worth, because it has value. It has been vetted at the betting table, and so there is you don't question that anymore. So if you have like some problems of having people in the team, yeah, this is not a shaping problem. This is a company design problem for me.
Yeah, I think that's also definitely worth considering. And also now when I think about it, I guess it would also be a question of having the upfront dialogue around appetite, and then seeing this specific pitch needs X amount of engineers and this amount of work from a designer, and then having the buy-in and the willingness to actually invest in the budget in terms of appetite, of time, to dedicate that designer for X amount of weeks inside the cycle. I guess that's also actually contributing to sort of wisely prioritizing the time of the limited amount of designers. But this was great, doing a bit of open discussion on that topic. Thanks a lot, David, and all of you.
A few thoughts, maybe questions, maybe ideas. I don't know about designers, and interesting that Frank, you asked what type of a designer you're dealing with. So in our case, we have designers who are product designers, so they do think about the user and the problems that we're trying to solve, and they do think about the breadboards and about the the fat sketch markers, though they are designers. So they really like to go pixel perfect from the very start. And so this was, this locks the scope in, and we don't want to lock the scope in. So we had quite a few interesting discussions with designer in my team. He would come up with a pixel perfect design, but then just would hide it away, make a fat marker sketch out of it. We would discuss in that fidelity, and if everything's fine, he would just bring up the ready design, like, yeah, we're good to go. But in other cases, and this more often happens when talking at the breadboard level, we would challenge some pieces and introduce some extra like technical constraints or opportunities that we can take off. So tying back to actually including technical people into writing pitches, into doing the shaping, and writing many pitches, and like many people doing the shaping. What Frank was talking, we tried a few times, and I was pretty happy with it. When our product manager, tech lead, and the product designer, we knew what the problem is, and before meeting, all of us would just draw a couple of doodles, like a couple of fat marker sketches from our own like perspective, like product manager from the business perspective, the product designer from like user perspective, having already maybe the graphics in his mind, and me or another tech lead would draw with technical constraints and opportunities in mind. And all of they are different, and finding the nice breadboard that can work is yeah, something that worked well. And interesting what yeah, David and Mackie were talking about, designers having the like comfort in doing the design in the first week of the cycle, already knowing the breadboard behind and being involved in the shaping. So just to end this thought, what our designers do, they do prioritize their work during the cycle to have the designs ready for the developers, or answer any questions if they arise. But besides that, they would be working on shaping or exploring problems or doing user research, or whatnot. And I don't know, our design ratio is design like 1 designer to 4 engineers. So that's kind of our ratio, and it's working tightly, but okay, I believe.
I don't know if anybody wants to add something, just to give you a proper example for the first cycle that was, so we are building some kind of editing tool for end users, and we knew we had to do some research of existing page builders, how they work, how those Squarespace and Webflow and all these tools. There was some UI research to be done about the patterns, the affordance and stuff like that. We didn't bet that time before the pitches was. We didn't want to invest time in that research if that's and that pitch was not going to be vetted by the stuff. So what happened? It was chosen, okay, and the first week was dedicated like to do some like result research, and they kind of write like a sum up of what they found, and it helped them shape the design work, and they know what, and they are still 5 weeks to implement all the stuff that they found. So yeah, I don't know if it helps, but like we didn't invest time before the stuff, and so there was some research inside the. I don't know if it. I was curious to ask this question to other in this meeting. Like, do you do some like also some research during the when you started the cycle, or just before?
We did that once and it blew up. We wanted to implement we're kind of a marketplace. We wanted to implement a chat functionality for the parties, and we put, I don't know, it was a overly optimistic estimate by some of the tech leads saying like, yeah, we'll research some tools to integrate in the first 2-3 days of the cycle, and then we'll just go with what we picked. I think we had our pick by end of week 2, and then it was still a big kind of cluster screw up after that. I can't recommend it from personal experience. Brian, you were going to say something on the topic of designers, I think, before. I don't know.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the interesting things to me are the ratio where it. I've just hired one full-time designer to take over. I was doing both like hands-on implementation type design as well as trying to shape things, which I don't recommend. I think some of you have been in that boat too. But we're at like 1 to 6 designer to developer. And luckily, because he is new, I was able to hire him with, this kind of work, this kind of process in mind. So intentionally found somebody who was comfortable with ambiguity, not a high fidelity upfront kind of designer, but somebody who could code as well and sort of design as it was being built. So
how do you screen for that? That sounds interesting.
it was interesting. We put out our own job listing and we worked with some recruiters, and I got a lot of very traditional, either like heavy duty user experience research type people or high fidelity designers, like interaction designers, traditional graphic designers, none of whom would have worked out very well. And then we got, I don't even know how we got in touch with this new recruiter, and right off the bat, he brought me 2 people who were hybrid sort of developer designers, and both were great fits, and we ended up with one of those. So I wish I could tell you something more helpful. We got lucky with a recruiter who somehow came up with these 2 really great candidates. But yeah, it's worked out well because, bringing somebody on, knowing how we wanted to work, how I wanted them to work was obviously very helpful. It's totally different if you inherit a team or have a different mix of skill sets to work with.
One of the things we do, we've kind of got 1 designer to 6 or 7 developers. One of the things we do, because we have kind of 2 developers pair up to a project, so there's not really enough, we can't spread the designer across 3 projects at once kind of thing. So we have like the front end person kind of lead the design, but then have the designer as kind of a support role for that developer. So if they need anything, they can kind of go to the designer and kind of, they can work together and kind of pair on stuff if they need help and stuff.
We wish to do this, but I don't know, our front-end engineers and our designers,
it's not quite working
there yet.
Perfectly as I probably pitched there, but it works sometimes, and other times it's a bit harder to kind of get people to kind of communicate and kind of work together sometimes and kind of speak up.
What we'd be hoping to help us out would be like a good design system, so that front-end engineers are working with puzzle pieces and not pixels. But we're at the moment transitioning from one design system to another, and we're moving pixels.
I feel you on that. So I think Brian kind of identified the 2 roles of design that we've encountered in our process as kind of the more user research, like UX-y designers, and very much like the high fidelity. I think we were asking the design team to kind of play both parts. And so if you were the designer and you traditionally are more of a UX research person and you're having to do some really front end visual design stuff, like you can increase the anxiety level a whole bunch on either side. So I think, David, I think the example that you were talking about with those 2 cycle projects, leveraging the more research UX kind of mindset in shaping reduces that anxiety, because you're like, all right, I've thought through all the things that I need to account for what the user needs to think about. And I feel much more confident being able to make a decision on the fly, because I have all that context in my head. And I think that's kind of what I've appreciated in general around ShapeUp, is when you have the product manager, the engineer, and the designer all kind of working together in that space, and you understand the problem really well, and then you kind of like, the rest just falls into place, because you understand the trade-offs that you're going to be making, because you have that business context or the value that you're trying to bring.
So
You're so right, but you're breaking my heart, because my engineering team insists on, well, one, they pair 100%, and they also pair switch, which means a feature will be passed from pair to pair periodically, usually with one person overlapping. And I think maybe a topic for another time, but it's been it's frustrating trying to get that, you get the whole context and state in your head and all that, and then a day or two later it's two completely different people working on it, and you in some ways have to start all over again. So, but I can't dictate right now how they work, so I just kind of have to live with it.
All right. Anybody feel like they have an issue they still want input on? I mean, we're coming up on 2 hours. You guys probably have, I don't know, if you guys want to drop out, or if you want to, is there anything we should talk about? We could do this again sometime. Otherwise, I'd also be happy for kind of feedback for the format. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm going to run, but I just wanted to say I really enjoyed it. I haven't been able to participate in the other more speaker-led ones, but I really like this roundtable conversation style. It's been great.
Anything to improve? On your end, what could we do better next time?
I could send you a list of topics ahead of time, which I didn't do that, but I've got a whole new list of topics now for the next one. So,
all right, awesome.
A piece of feedback. I also really enjoyed this. I think the informal and sort of we see where the discussion takes us. This format is really great. One idea could be to gather the ideas for topics up front, and then maybe initially do some dot voting, or at least prioritizing collectively in some way what topics are most interesting or have most people interests, and then do it that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was trying to do this, kind of synthesize this, but I also kind of had a really unplanned week. So yeah, that's a good point. I'll think of ideas to do that. Cool. Anyone else? Words of wisdom?
I'm not sure if that's wisdom, but I enjoyed it as well. Really nice talking to you guys, hearing your experiences. I think the number of participants was in our favor, like not too many. So you don't know the context that the person is talking to, but enough that they have different situations and team sizes and problems and similarities. So yeah, that was really nice.
But did you guys feel that there was enough overlap on the things that were shared, like that you could relate to? Because what I want to avoid is that I don't know, that like 5% of the things are relevant for someone that joins, which I guess you can get out of by collecting topics up front and kind of setting a theme maybe for one of these. I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry, David, I'll let you go first.
No, but what I get from this meeting, so yeah, I agree. Like everybody could talk, and that was nice. I get that, like the context where you practice ShapeUp is very important and can really differ. So maybe you can have topic on how to do ShapeUp with, like, I don't know, large teams, small teams, I don't know. you know what I mean, like shape up with context, because like maybe shape up in startups, shape up in, maybe it's not the same to do shape up in at cars.com that for on an open source project. And so, and maybe you want to maybe focus on some techniques. Maybe some people, they have hard time doing the shape up work. And because we talk a lot about the cycles and stuff, I understand, I think like what I get from everyone today is like, nobody wants to get back. I think everybody wants to improve on shaping up. And so, yeah, I don't know, because after that you have to do workshops if people wants to know, you know. So maybe David, for you next time you want to do like, well, like it's honestly it was great for me. The added value is like being able to have all this kind of feedback and seeing everybody struggling. Honestly, that helps, because I didn't feel I was part of this meeting because it's just one cycle and I was like, oh, these guys are doing that for like 6 months and stuff. But yeah, I could share and I see like yeah, it was like really helpful for me.
Cool, that's good to hear. And I think what one of my goals is for this meetup series is to have the more speaker-led talks kind of as case studies, like you said, Frank, where you can go and pick those that, I don't know, the context you relate to and see how they've made it work. And then, yeah, it might, I don't know, maybe it makes sense to every once in a while have one of these kind of let's dwell in our pain of struggling to make it work, whatever. So I also find it always a bit cathartic to share kind of struggles around this. So yeah, cool. Thank you guys. This was a lot of fun for me. I really appreciate all of you making the time. It's a serious investment, so I hope you get something out of it as well. And yeah, next month probably have a speaker led again after that as well, but maybe then we do another one of these.
Sounds good.
Thanks
for putting it together.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.